Hello, and welcome to the Hamumu Halloween Home Horror Hoedown,
the podcast where we watch 31 horror movies throughout the hallowed month of October.
Ranging from the critically acclaimed to film school projects gone gruesomely awry.
And we take them all way too seriously.
I'm your host, Mike Hummel.
And I'm your host, Sully Hummel.
Now warning, we use a ghoulish number of spoilers, so watch the movies first.
Second warning, we don't know anything about anything, so don't take us seriously while we take these movies seriously.
Today's movie is called Detention from 2011.
I like how your intro to today's movie was sort of cartoonishly manic, much like today's movie was.
Okay, yes. This was a very weird movie.
Okay, I feel like I could sum up my feelings about this movie in one sentence.
Let's hear that sentence to start us off.
Detention from 2011 is very much like if Scott Pilgrim vs. the World had taken meth.
You are very correct. But when you started that sentence, I thought you were going to say, the movie Detention is against drunk driving. Which is something the movie told us.
It did very clearly pop up an entire, text message.
We got texted by the movie.
Suggesting that even if you are suicidal, you should not drink and drive.
Yeah. Thank you, movie. That's good to know.
I mean, I feel like they did need to do that because the movie Detention was not against many other things.
No, it was so weird. You brought up Scott Pilgrim.
I did.
And I, midway through the movie, wrote the note, Scott Pilgrim attempt, which is what this movie definitely was. Then I circled that note later in the movie when I was like, come on, people.
Yes.
You're just doing Scott Pilgrim.
Yes.
Then I looked up when Scott Pilgrim came out, 2010. This movie from 2011.
Oh, yes. Very strongly influenced by Scott Pilgrim.
Intensely.
If nothing else.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just influence, but they saw that. I mean, maybe not because it came out so shortly after. Maybe they were simultaneously done, but that's impossible because this is so blatant.
Yeah.
They were trying to make the same thing. They were like, that was super cool. And they were right. And we want to make some of that.
But then they didn't do it right.
No, they didn't. They did something very weird. I mean, this movie it's surreal.
Yeah, but so is Scott Pilgrim.
Yes.
But this, I mean, really, it's like if you injected Scott Pilgrim with a whole lot of drugs. It's so manic through the whole thing that for the first third of the movie, I could not figure out what was going on.
Right. Yes. I had that same feeling where one of my early notes is that this is an art film where nothing that happens is really happening exactly. It's just more you kind of watch it and interpret it and try to decide what it's telling you, like how it relates to the theme or something.
Right.
But not in a real artsy way. Like it was all goofy, silly stuff, but somehow not real stuff. I mean, know.
I would argue that goofy and silly can still be artistic.
Sure. Like Scott Pilgrim.
Although I'm sure there are people who would disagree about that statement. But this just missed the mark a little bit. It just didn't quite hit the target it was aiming for. And
a lot, very often.
And I went through these phases where, for the first third, I was like, I don't know what's going on. I'm not enjoying this because it's moving at such a fast pace that I can't, I feel like I'm sinking into quicksand.
Well, it always felt like it was leaving tons of things unspoken or unexplained. And you're just like, okay.
And then in the second third of the movie, I was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm starting to piece the things together, and I was getting ready to forgive it for the completely manic, chaotic first third. I'm like, nope, they're going to pull it together. It's going to be okay. And then they climbed into this time-traveling stuffed bear mascot.
Yeah, they did do that.
And they presented the theory that the daughter and the mother could switch bodies, but both be teenagers, just in different time periods.
Right, they didn't switch at the moment. They switched one of them back into the past and the other one to now.
Right, so the daughter who's like 17 or 18, is now in her 17 or 18-year-old mother's body, pregnant with herself, by the way.
Yeah, back in 1992.
And the mother is now in her daughter's teenage body in the present time, which is, 2011? No.
No, that's definitely what happened.
Absolutely not. I forbid this.
And then that's part of where my note of started liking it in the last 10 minutes comes from, is that nothing ever made sense. But then in the last 10 minutes of the movie, everything starts to tie together.
It does.
And like there's this whole thing about this girl is obsessed with the year 1992 specifically. And it turns out that's because she's been reliving life since 1992 and not aging. She is aging.
That she switched the body.
Oh, that's right.
It's the mother.
Right.
She's obsessed with 1992 because that's when she was a teenager.
Yes.
But then also...
Yeah.
Here's the problem. Here's the biggest problem that I had with this movie. Everyone who went back to 1992, all of these 2011 teenagers who time traveled through the Magic Bear into 1992, got there and were like, this is amazing. I never want to leave.
They loved 92.
And all I could think was, nuh-uh.
But all I could think was the creator of this movie was growing up in the 90s and really wants to be back there.
Why?
I don't know.
Why? Like,
it's nostalgia.
Even at the beginning, when I hadn't realized that the movie was taking place in 2011, because there was so much 1992 nostalgia, even just not just for the one character, but for the entire movie.
Yeah, the way they presented 2011, we were like, is this taking place in the 90s? We eventually realized, oh, they're all texting each other. That can't be 1990.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute. No, I lived in 1992. I was not text messaging with my friends.
Yeah.
It was so steeped in it, even before they time traveled back. And all I could think was, oh, the 90s were horrible. And then they time traveled back and were like, this is amazing. Overalls. Ooh. Yeah. No.
She brought those overalls from 2011, though.
She did. She paid $100 for them in 2011 for her vintage overalls.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know. I probably because I lived it and I didn't love it when I was living it. But I don't get the obsession with the 90s. Like, No,
well,
crisscross.
They mentioned crisscross.
No.
That was a really stupid concept. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I really like from the 90s. Basically, the late 90s is what I like. The early 90s is pretty sketchy. 92, for example.
92, for example. It was that, like, transitioning from the 80s to the early 2000s. Like, it just, that whole decade was just such a weird transitional decade. Yeah. And it was, like, to me, it feels like a decade with no identity. And now I'm wondering, is that like how Midwesterners think they don't have an accent?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a thing. I mean, the thing for me is it seems like there are a bunch of different identities of the 90s. Like the 80s, we all know the new wave thing. Sure. And there's punk going on and stuff too, but that like the new wave kind of look and those, what are those folders called that you love?
Lisa Frank.
Oh,
Frank Lisa.
Lisa Frank, okay.
You've been watching too much TikTok.
Yeah, so like all that stuff, we all know that stuff, and like that's the 80s. But then in the 90s, there's grunge and there's cool leather trench coats and like there's like 5 different things.
Yeah. Wait, when was The Matrix from? That wasn't from the 90s, was it?
1999.
Oh, well, see, late 90s.
Yes, that's why I like the late 90s.
Sure. Yeah, well, when I think of the 90s, I think of Seattle grunge.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm thinking of, like, 1996, and I think that's because that's when Seattle grunge finally got to rural northern Minnesota, sure. Right? Like, yeah. You know, I'm thinking of jeans and, you know, big black chunky boots and flannel shirts and band t-shirts and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's from a very specific location. Like, yeah, like you said, the 80s has this whole overarching umbrella theme. I mean, and the 90s does not feel like it has that to me.
It probably doesn't really. It's just that that's the part that stuck around and that we now connect with the 80s. But the 90s doesn't feel that way. It feels like a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like, there's so many decades where if someone said, dress like this, dress like that, I would know exactly what to do.
The 90s is way trickier.
And the 90s would be tricky. I mean, I would go Seattle grunge, I guess. But there's just so many things. And like when you watch this movie, you see that because every character has this other, they're all completely different. But I guess they all, when I think about it, I'm like, oh, okay, she's dressed like Blossom. She's dressed like My So-Called Life. Like there were those.
He's dressed like Jean-Luc Picard.
Okay, so let's talk about the premise of the movie. Is there a premise? Can you summarize the premise of this movie?
Well, I think you don't have any idea what's happening until the very end, but I would say the whole real point of the movie is not like any artistic point, but like is that stuff is happening that is the result of this time travel loop. Like, everything that happens because of the time travel. And so it kind of wraps up with this whole, hey, I know that because it was the thing I saw before that hadn't happened yet. And stuff like that. Like, it's a time travel fun thing.
It is definitely a time travel movie. Although, as you're saying that, I'm feeling very critical of it as a time travel movie in that very common issue with time travel movies, which is you can go back and change time, but apparently this is the very first time they've done that this loop has happened because like they didn't know those things were happening until they went back in time and then it started happening. And in that case, like, really, we happen to catch the very first time and they happen to solve everything on the very first time?
Well, like, of course.
It's a flaw with
it wasn't the very first time because the world blew up. And then they went back again to before it blew up.
Oh, yeah.
So
okay.
There were 2 attempts.
Okay.
But here's the thing. First of all, the bear just sent them wherever was appropriate. They didn't even choose.
No, there was a thing. Didn't you see?
I know
there was like she wiggled her hand a little bit on the glowy thing.
I did see her do that.
Clearly she was steering the bear.
Except she was surprised where they ended up.
I mean, it was the first time she'd ever steered a time bear.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying, though.
No, but beyond that, though, then you run into Billy, old TV hand, who has fly DNA because he touched an alien meteor that crashed to Earth at some point. Which has
nothing to do with the movie.
Related in no way to any part of the time travel stuff. You'd think that would somehow connect.
Also,
except maybe the bear that they got from another planet was because the aliens came to Earth and brought the bear, I guess. That was still a weird little sidetrack to take. And why? Why did his dad put a TV on his hand? Why? That's part of it.
Why did he have a TV on his hand for like 8 years of his life? And everyone was just like, yes, that's normal.
Well, and it healed up his hand by being in there for a long time.
Why?
It's probably deep artistic stuff about how TV heals.
Sure, because that's a common theme.
It is common. And that's kind of where this movie was. Like, it's Scott Pilgrim. Like, the meth you're talking about is like Dadaism. Like, they're just like, let's go nuts and have, this is what happens because it's insane. Fly DNA.
All right, I have to leave and no longer be part of this podcast because you just used the term Dadaism, and it's clear that this podcast has evolved past my intelligence level.
Solange, this podcast is supposed to be about you taking horror movies too seriously.
No, I mean, I love that you did that, but clearly I can no longer participate. You have evolved past me. No, I think I like that theory. I do.
And the bear was magnetic.
Sometimes.
Why?
But only sometimes.
Only when it was appropriate. There was a lot of stuff. Like, the first time they showed the bear being magnetic, like, what was happening in that scene? Like, it was just telling us the bear's magnetic, but I don't even know what was going on. There were so many scenes where I had no idea what was happening.
There were so many things where the only reason something happened was because they needed to set up. It's almost like they wrote it, and then they're like, oh, in order for this to wrap up, we need, like, how are we going to fix this? And someone's like, well, what if the bear was magnetic? And they were like, yeah, but he hasn't been all this time. And they're like, well, we can just go back and throw in a couple scenes where he is.
Yeah. Which is time travel. They went back in the script to set something up for later. I mean, that. It was happening for them in a very real way.
Yeah.
Dialogue so hip, I can't follow it, is one of my notes.
Yes, this movie made me feel old.
Yeah.
And
it was from 9 years ago.
So this does bring me back to something I was thinking earlier. Like, the 1990s, I don't feel like they have an identity that I recognize, right?
Yeah.
But then when I think about getting closer, you know, like, going further, like, I don't really see, if someone told me to dress up like the 2000s,
oh yeah,
I would have no idea.
That's a distance issue. You have to get further away for it to crystallize.
Right, for it to coalesce. So maybe there is an identity for the 80s. No, excuse
90s.
Me, the 90s. It just hasn't, like, settled yet. It's still kind of bubbling.
Yeah.
But it definitely did make me feel, like, old, that all of these teenagers who would be 28 now because they are millennials.
Yeah.
Yeah, their whole, everything about them, the way they interacted with each other, the way they talked to each other, to their parents, to anyone, the things they liked, the things they didn't like, the jokes they told, like everything about it was, I didn't get it.
Yeah, there were a lot of lines where I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to express. Like, I don't even know, are you making friends with this guy? Are you attacking him? Like, I couldn't even get the gist.
Yeah.
So weird.
Yeah. Okay, can we talk about the vegetarianism in this movie? Riley, the main character, is aggressively vegetarian, but also not, because she's
so vegetarian.
Because she, in her speech about vegetarianism, like, she talks about how, well, some vegetarians eat fish because, well, you know, we don't know fish feel pain and whatever. But then every time she interacts with the Canadian guy who, like, stomps all over her during the debate, she then ends up eating, like, a hamburger, a hot dog, or whatever. Like, she eats meat multiple times.
Has to eat meat because she has been shamed and
she's
must
been
recover.
Schooled by the Canadian.
To be clear, though, the Canadian is actually an alien who is a vegetable.
Yes, which is, like, the final scene of the movie. It is revealed that Gord the Canadian is an alien plant being, and they are there to wreak revenge on Earthlings who are constantly eating their children.
Yeah, again, that's something totally unrelated to the time travel, just another piece of insanity.
Just thrown right in there for no reason. Yeah, honestly, I kind of enjoyed that. But, so many non sequiturs in this movie.
Yeah. Also, so much vomiting in this movie.
Ugh, yes. I'd like to address one particular question that came up.
Okay.
How hard is it to be cool in 1992?
It's not hard. If you wear overalls, you're good.
Overalls, and you know about crisscross?
You know crisscross.
Yeah. You know that thing where people call guacamole guac? I started that.
Yeah, there's an interesting paradox there because, I mean, we should assume they were already doing that because people do that, but then maybe in their universe it wasn't until she invented it. I don't know.
Yeah. You know, what we haven't talked about yet is the fact that the killer in this movie, through most of it, is a character from a movie that is coming out in that universe. And there's a whole, like, meta scene where the characters in this movie go into the movie or are watching the movie that's about to come out, which is about characters who are watching a movie that's about to come out, which is about characters watching a movie.
Yeah. And again, that's something that was one of my favorite parts. It was fun that it just kept going deeper. And yet at the same time, there was no reason for it. And it didn't, I mean, I don't think it means anything. It might mean something about our obsession with media and something.
I love that this is the episode where Mikey takes things too seriously. You know what?
Yeah.
After the credits, the opening credits which were mind-breakingly painful to watch because they were all over the place and they were unreadable and...
Yeah, they were in the world of the movie and they just like pan right by them and you barely could see them.
After that, I think that set the tone for me and I was just like, through the whole movie.
Yeah,
like I had a really hard time.
Just have to let it wash over you.
Yeah.
Can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my question that has nothing to do with that, just like how this movie works.
Right?
So Elliot is the kid who was in detention for 19 years for something he did, which again, fun time travel element.
That was my favorite part of the whole movie, I think. His storyline.
And that he spent his time in detention working out the equation that figured out that the world was going to be destroyed in 9 minutes, except 9 minutes from now, but in 1992, which doesn't even make sense because that's the past.
That for 19 years at the same desk in the same detention room, and he's just scratching out a more and more and more elaborate mathematical equation. Not like doing a lot of math and then, no, just over 19 years getting the equation written down.
Yeah.
Apparently he was doing the work in his head.
Well, and that brings me to my question, which is, why didn't he age?
I don't know.
That seems like a plot hole to me. It's just a guy who was around for 19 years not getting any older.
It was some kind of weird curse thing that he, sort of like how there's the whole fly blood alien thing with the one kid. Like, this guy had some kind of weird curse on him because he was I remember the principal put him in there and said, you are going to stay in here until, I don't remember what, but it was something like, you're going to stay in here until you understand what you did or something like that, which would, he had to come up with the equation, but that apparently that curse made it so he didn't age.
Yeah, although he could have. I mean, if he was 20 years older, who cares? But anyway, it also reminds me of like the whole structure of the movie. At the beginning, Clapton is told or decides for himself, I don't know, that he has to either get an A or save the world in order to be able to graduate.
Oh, right. That's what Dane Cook's character, that's what the principal told him. Like, he was going to fail unless he got an A or saved the world, and those were equally improbable. And
yet, that's what happened.
He got the A because he time traveled back in the bear and apparently was in 1992 for several months.
Yeah, months or weeks.
Weeks
I don't know.
Or something.
Yeah.
Before the other people who got into the time traveling bear immediately after him.
Yeah, because, he twisted the dial to be that time instead of the other time.
That makes sense.
That's what the dial is for, obviously.
Right. I mean, the bear brought him to where he needed to be. The bear knew. I think the bear was God.
An interesting angle. You're taking this too seriously.
I mean, he was an alien bear, but Thor is essentially an alien too, and he's a god.
Yeah. I mean, this bear was basically Thor or Magneto.
Magneto, that's good, because sometimes he's magnetic.
Sometimes.
I'd like to point out that this Saturday detention took place from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah, I have a note on that too.
On prom night.
I mean, who cares about the prom night? It was 12-hour detention.
Also, apparently, getting out at 10 p.m. meant they would have missed all of prom. And I don't know about you, but at my school, prom was a lock-in. And we stayed all night long.
Don't know about that. Here's my thing, though. Partway through this movie, I developed a theory of what this movie was doing.
Okay.
Which is not accurate, but it's interesting anyway, is that for a little while, it seemed like the movie was actually a mini anthology movie telling the backstories of each of these characters, because it would put up a title card and be like, here's the story of how Billy got a TV hand. And you'd go back into his life and see something for about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it would do another one and another one and another one. There were like 7 or 8 of those throughout the movie. And they were fun. They didn't make any sense, but it was an interesting thing that it really felt like anthology format.
Well, it's how they gave us all the little bits and pieces that we needed for all the threads to be tied together at the end.
Which is a cool thing. I like that.
Yeah, I think that there was some skill to that. It was still more manic than I would have liked, but I will admit there was definitely skill to how this movie was put together, how this story was told.
But why did Billy have fly DNA?
I don't know.
Huh.
So at one point, I wrote this down. Riley and Clapton are prom king and queen, dancing to Bop, and her best friend is now 20 years older than her and dating the principal.
Yeah, that's
married
true.
to the principal.
Yeah.
And that sentence right there, like, it's the heart of this movie. Like, the chaos of that sentence is an example of how chaotic this movie was.
We should acknowledge that this movie was apparently classed as horror, which, I mean, there was a horror movie that they watched from which a serial killer came and killed some of them, but not in any way that was scary or...
I mean, they were being stalked. It was just as much a horror movie as Scream is.
I guess. They mentioned Scream,
Yeah, because it was almost the identical plot.
Yeah.
And they pointed out how, like, they definitely, like, lampshaded the idea that this was almost the identical plot to Scream.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly it's not the identical plot.
No, that's true.
No,
okay.
This is very different. But yeah, the normal part of it was the plot of Scream. But I like the part where they were getting kind of deep into that and the killer was starting to kill a bunch of people. It kind of went nuts and killed a whole bunch of people at once. And they sort of just blew it off and didn't care. At one point, they're walking down the hall and they shove some bodies aside and just keep going.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I mean, it was definitely in the comedic horror vein.
Oh, yes. It was not trying to scare anybody.
No. But it did have a lot of gore.
Yeah.
So, there's lots of movies where it's not about the scare. It's about the grossness.
Yeah.
I guess the only other thing that I have to say about this movie is the apparent lesson, which I'm not sure I would have gotten from this movie, except that they explicitly told it to me at the end. The only way to change the past is to change the present. That's deep, right?
What does that mean?
That if you want to change your past,
you got to put your past in your behind.
Yes. A little Lion King shout out. Yeah, I don't know what it means, but they said it like it was definitely the takeaway of the movie.
I mean, if you have a time-traveling bear, that's reasonable, but...
A time-traveling sort of magnetic bear.
Yeah. In the real world, you can't change the past because it's in the past. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I don't want to see this movie again.
No.
But I feel like I would get a lot more seeing it again. Like, I would see so many things and start to understand them so much more. It's a movie you could watch several times, I think, and learn more every time.
Sure, because first of all, it goes so fast that watching it a second time, like, you would be able to see things that you just missed the first time.
Yeah.
But definitely knowing the whole story and going back and seeing the early parts, there would be things that you would appreciate more. Yeah.
Riley's shoe was in the trophy case. I still don't understand that at all. But I know how it got there.
Yeah. Was it in there through the whole movie? Was there always a boot
I think so,
there?
but I'm not actually sure.
Because
that's a
that
rewatch
doesn't make
issue.
Any sense.
Yeah. I don't know, but it was still there after 20 years, so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, maybe things would make a lot more sense if we watched it again.
Probably.
I don't know. We'll never know.
We'll never know.
Ratings.
And so the reason why we're not going to see this again is that as silly and weird and kind of fun as it was kind of hard to watch also, and it just wasn't a necessary thing in my life. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it. So I will give this movie 2.5 Claire Daneses out of 5 because it's, I don't even know what to say. I don't know whether to recommend this or not recommend this. Like, it totally depends on you. Like, it's so weird, and weird is fun. I don't know, man. I'm not going to watch it again.
I am also not likely to watch this movie again. Although now that I think about it, it's the kind of movie where you might, like, with the right person, I might be like, okay, buckle up. We're about to go on a journey.
It
and
is
like
a journey.
watch them watch the movie. That could be entertaining. Sort of like how we like to force people to watch Landshark.
Yeah, but
Because
that's
it's so
for their
fun to
benefit, though.
Watch them watch it. So I am also giving it a 2.5 Claire Danes out of 5.
Okay.
But I am adding an additional half point because
Wait, are you giving it 3?
I'm giving it a 3.
Oh, okay.
Because I feel like I might just be a little too old to fully appreciate this movie.
Oh, yeah. I know I am.
And so I'm going to say if you are over the age of 40, you may or may not enjoy this movie.
But if you really like 1992...
This is the movie for you. And if you are like a millennial, you might really get into this movie because it might be your kind of humor. It might be your kind of vision of the world. I don't know. It is definitely not mine, but I was not a 90s child. I was an 80s child. So, like, I am definitely the tail end of Gen X, disaffected. I would never have expressed as many emotions as these millennials did in this movie.
Yeah.
I will say, though, I liked hearing CNC Music Factory.
Well, there you go.
That was one of the few things out of the 90s that I actually enjoyed.
Well, that's good. Now, interesting twist. Let me tell you a little story. Yesterday, we watched The Blob and the Blob, and I thought that was really fun and cool, and I was thinking about it and going, ooh, could we do, double movies? And whatever, it just kind of passed me by a little bit. And then I went to look up today's movie, Detention. And when I tried to look it up, other movies also named Detention were getting in my way. And I went, what? Yeah, I took my glasses off to say that. I decided that this year we're going to do Evil Twins. And the evil twin of the movie Detention from 2011.
What is it?
It's a little film. Well, it's funny because originally it was going to be a little film called Detention from 2019, which is a Chinese movie, very historical based. I don't know anything else about it because I wasn't able to watch it. Because when I tried to find it, I got a different little movie called Detention from 2019. Which may sound familiar to you, but it's not the same movie.
I sort of feel like I'm trapped in one of these detention time loops.
Exactly. So this movie was, wow. It's barely on IMDb. And if you ever see it, you'll know why. You can watch it on Tubi, the streaming network. And you watched it with me, as did Amy and Colin. So that was fun that we got a whole party together to watch this movie.
I mean, for certain definitions of the word fun, yes.
Yeah. So we're not going to do a whole review because we just did a whole review. This is just The Evil Twin. We're just going to give it a quick once over. What do you have to say about Detention 2019?
So I am going to give Detention 2019, the Evil Twin movie, 1 bottle of Jack Daniel out of 5.
I think it's a bottle of Jack Daniel.
It's just 1.
Yeah.
There's no S if there's only 1.
Yeah, I know grammar.
Because it was definitely one of those movies that was conceived of and largely created by a single person who was trying to root out some inner demons.
Mm-hmm,
and
definitely.
I have an appreciation for that, so I will give 1 point. But it was not well done in any way, shape, or form.
Well, that's true.
I will say that there is something there. Like, there is a story to be told about the Catholic Church and the inappropriate things that happen there and the trauma caused to children and all of that. But this story did not do it.
No, it did not. Yeah, this movie, I mean, just to make sure you're watching the right one, it is not Chinese. It's in quote-unquote English.
Yes.
But definitely neither the scriptwriter nor any of the actors actually speaks English. So it got real interesting.
No, to be fair, they all spoke English, but none of them speak English as a first language.
That is for sure. And couldn't recognize when they were getting it very, very wrong.
Yeah.
Which was hilarious. And I love that kind of stuff. That amuses me. So I enjoyed that. It was very much like the movie The Room by Tommy Wiseau. I just remembered his name. So if you're looking for that, this is kind of that. And,
only really, really traumatically delving into the horrific things that Catholic priests do to children. So, trigger warning.
Yeah, one of the quotes I wrote down, just so you understand the kind of movie it is, I oppose strongly to this kind of behavior, which was a response to being shot. Or someone else being shot 3 times in the chest. So it was good. Also, not remotely a horror movie, but the image for it on Tubi is like a ghost lady, like, it like looks like the scariest horror movie ever. And that's a lie. That's not even related to the movie in any way.
Oh, no. The picture and the description that's on there were of a movie that I desperately want to see. This was not that movie.
Yeah, this is it's like a hostage scenario is all it is. It's like a thriller thing, except ridiculous. So yeah, I'm going to give this also 1 bottle of Jack Daniel out of 5 because it was fun to have fun watching it, but I wanted it to be over a lot sooner than it was.
Yeah, and it was only like an hour and 14 minutes long or something like that. It was pretty short.
Yeah. But, the thing is, that was one of my notes, is that it could have been 10 minutes long. Like, everything about it was drawn out so slowly. Even, like, these action scenes where, like, people are pointing guns at each other. They'd be, like, pointing the gun at one person, and then they like, slowly drift it over to the other person and be like, now I'm covering you. Mm-hmm. It's like... What? It's like it was underwater. It was so weird.
Somebody got shot and another person's response was, God, no. Like exactly like that.
That was actually the exact same reaction that one of the girls had when the other one took a drink of Jack Daniels.
Yes.
No, don't do it.
But then they immediately got drunk.
Yeah, 2 sips.
So, if you're going to choose between these movies...
Oh, yeah. This made me so appreciate the 2011 Detention. Like, a lot.
Yes, very much so. All right, well, what are we watching tomorrow?
Tomorrow's movie is entitled Cry Wolf from 2005. And I do not think it's a werewolf movie, but I guess we'll find out. Luckily, though, we're going to also watch its evil twin... Crying Wolf 3D from 2015, which that has to be good. It's got 3D in the name.
3D.
So,
are you going to provide 3D glasses?
No. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be in 3D.
I'm sure that will improve things.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're going to watch that with me. You are not required to watch any of the Evil Twins because I know that means 62 movies we have to watch.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of movies. But
and these Evil Twins are not quality movies, I don't think.
That's part of the fun I have not mentioned is that I chose them entirely based on their titles without looking into how good or whatever they were, which normally I kick a lot of movies out for not being something I want to see. And so we saw stuff like Detention. So yeah. we're going to be seeing some sketchy movies, but we're going to find some diamonds in the rough.
I hope so. All right. We'll catch you
on the flippity flop. We're still doing that, right?
We are now.
Most of the time ASMR is about whispering, but there is a whole world of ASMR that's